Hello, welcome back to Funding Fridays. For those of you who haven't listened before, my name is Debbie Lewis. I'm the Regional Ecosystem Manager at NatWest within the Enterprise team, and I cover the East Midlands and East of England as my part of the country. And through my work with business owners, what I'm finding is, particularly as the landscape of funding is changing, is entrepreneurs are saying to me more and more often, where can I find grants? How can I get my hands on some money to grow my business? And so that's how the podcast really started. We are available on YouTube if you like to watch by video, but you can also listen only on Spotify. So I am delighted to be joined today by a new guest to join the podcast. So thanks, Will, for joining us. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Hi there, good morning. Yeah, my name is Will Dallimore. I work for Buckinghamshire Business First and Engage Solutions. My role here is Rural Business Development Manager.
Amazing. And thank you for coming on to talk to us. Tell us, what's the fund that we're going to be talking about today?
So we are talking about the Rural England Prosperity Fund, which is a 110 million funding pot nationally. And it's available or becoming available, and it needs to be spent by March 2025. So there's quite a short window to actually spend this money in, and it has been allocated to local authorities up and down the country.
Amazing. And so just to be super clear, I cover the East Midlands. You cover where?
Buckinghamshire in the main part, but that also includes surrounding counties and sort of other areas. My background is in delivering rural development funding programs over the past 7 years, and this fund replaces those funds. And with that, with past funds, I've sort of covered Northamptonshire, parts of Bedfordshire, Milton Keynes, Buckinghamshire, Herts and Oxfordshire.
Brilliant. And Will and I have had a bit of a kind of warm-up conversation about this. The fund that we're talking about does exist all over England. However, it varies from region to region. So Will and I are going to talk really predominantly around Buckinghamshire. However, there will be things that you can take away, and we will be signposting you at the end of the episode where to find out more information, regardless of where you are across my patch. So Will, tell us, what do we need to know about this fund? Who's it for? Who's eligible? And what can they use it for?
So it is it's targeted at rural businesses. As I mentioned, it's specifically replacing the EU funding, which funded the LEADER programme and RDP growth programme. And so rural businesses, and it is looking at, depending on your area, it can cover any capital funding items. So it can be really quite varied, and there will be lots of opportunities moving forward.
Can I probe a little bit more on what rural means? Because rural to me means you're not in a built-up town or city, that it's kind of in an area that is maybe more countryside. But are we talking specifically sectors around agriculture, farming, or does it literally mean any business that's out in the sticks?
So yes and no. The funding is provided from DEFRA as a top up to the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and so if you take it from the DEFRA stance, yes, it is for sort of traditional rural activities under their remit, but ultimately any rural business could qualify. The definition, or the DEFRA's definition of rural, is any town or village under a population of 10,000 people. And then there are also some rural market towns which can be eligible, which go over that population limit. But as a broad rule of thumb, if you're in a rural area, and you could apply if you've got a specific capital project in mind.
Amazing. And what sort of monetary figures are we talking about? What's the minimum amount? And is this match funded or pure funded?
So it's all match funded. again, I can only talk about what's really happening in Buckinghamshire because the wider area is completely different. So in Bucks, you are looking at grants of between 2,500 up to 300,000. The maximum state aid cap is 315,000. So it can be quite significant sums of money. But as I've sort of stated, it changes dependent on local authority area. And I do know some areas are capping it at 7,500 or 10,000 maximum grant.
Okay. And so when we talk about match funding, because some people will be less familiar with the funding landscape, what we mean by that is, let's say you wanted to spend £10,000 on a piece of plant machinery, you would pay the £10,000. Well, you would first of all fill in the application form, make sure it's signed off, because you can't just buy it and claim it back. You've got to go through the process. So let's say you had a great conversation with Will, you filled in the form, they agreed that they were going to give you some match funding. You'd go out and spend your £10,000, let's say, and then you would submit all your receipts and you would get 5,000 of that back. Is it 50% match funded?
Again, it's dependent on what area you're in. But yeah, some areas are working on 50-50. In Buckinghamshire, it's 40% match funding.
Okay, awesome.
So 40% grant to 60% match.
So you would spend your 10,000 and you'd get 4,000 back. Amazing. Yep. Amazing. And so in terms of the types of things that people can be spending the money on, I'm guessing, as most grants are, this is about growing, scaling, developing your business. This grant money can't be used to bankroll slow times, for example. It's investment in items. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. It's again, I think varied will probably be the word of the interview, but yeah, DEFRA specifically saying it's got to be used or could be used for diversification from agricultural businesses, looking at food and drink processing, adding value to local rural products, and so that is the theme that you generally see the typical project coming forward. But having said that, there are other things that will be eligible if there are capital items that a sort of visitor attraction wanted to purchase or offer a new service to the market.
Brilliant. And we understand that cost of living, cost of doing business, it's tough out there at the moment. So for people who are they are in rural areas and they have got an idea. So let's, as an example, we've got somebody who's got some land, they're looking to diversify the use of that land. What would be your advice around their project planning and the time at which they come and talk to you? Because this is quite a short timeline for application and deployment and reclaim of the money, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. And I think my first bit of advice would be always to pick up the phone to whoever is administering the fund, find out what the timescales are in your particular area, because some programs haven't launched yet, and I know some local authorities aren't looking at launching until the new year. So the timescale for delivering a project in that area is very sort of finite. The other major barrier at the present is looking at planning permission, and so that's something you need to get on with, particularly with quite a long lead-in time to be able to obtain permissions and licenses and things to actually develop a project.
Great shout. And is there anything else in terms of considerations, eligibility, the way that the application is structured? Any top tips or any nuggets of advice?
One thing that I always say to anybody, which goes across any application that or fund you're applying to, is don't assume the person reading the application knows your business, and so it's really important to provide that background info, what it is you do, and what the business wants to do, and how the project has come about, because that is the insight that someone needs to understand why you are making the decision to go down a specific project route.
Absolutely. And in terms of that holistic support piece, often I hear people saying, oh, well, I don't know if they want to give the money away. Let's be really clear about this. The money needs to be given out, right?
Yes, indeed, certainly. Again, it depends on your area's allocations. So the funding has been split. In some cases, it's going to lower tier authorities, and they've got anywhere in the region of 400 to 700,000 to spend within the next sort of 18 months. Unitary authorities like Buckinghamshire has got 1.8 million to spend, and there are some other combined authorities that go into 3, 4, and 5 million. So to spend that amount of money, certainly the unitaries and the upper tier and combined authorities, they've got to have a lot of projects in a very short space of time. And typically rural development programs take a lot longer to build up a head of steam to get to that level of spend, which is often year 3 and beyond. And so that isn't an opportunity in this fund, which is one thing I say to businesses. And I said to a business yesterday, in fact, that put an application in, because if the money isn't spent by the local authority in their particular area, it will be handed back. And we don't know what's going to happen beyond March 25. It could well be that the programme is extended for another year. But that's sort of the unknown at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned earlier you've been working in, I don't want to say in this field because it feels like too much of a pun for a role.
Yeah.
But you have been working in this area for the last 7 years, deploying and supporting. So fingers crossed, it's something that will just continue to change and look different, but still be available. How much help is available for entrepreneurs who are new to exploring grant funding? Can you help them to complete forms, etc.?
Yeah, very much so. One of the strengths of the past programme was the fact that you had local people on hand to help applicants apply for the fund. In Buckinghamshire, that is my role, sort of working alongside the local authority to deliver this funding is to support the applicants along the application process. It's not going to be the case in all areas, but for where that is the case, I would say contact your local growth hub and business support organisation, because they should be aware of this particular fund, and they will be able to provide the support and advice.
Brilliant. That is a great summary. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you wanted us to share, or any final words of advice for anybody listening in?
I think always make sure the project that you want to apply for is a project or a business that you want to run. Quite often you get people that is ringing up to say, what can we do to get the money? And it's got to be something that you're going to stick with. And sort of finally, it would be to give it a go, pick up the phone, because as I say, there is a lot of money to spend within a short space of time, and rural businesses need to make use of it.
Absolutely. Did you say 1.8 million for Buckinghamshire?
Yeah, it is.
So come on, Buckinghamshire. I know there are a lot of market towns and rural little iddles across Buckinghamshire. Let's get all that money spent so that we don't send it back. And if somebody is based in Buckingham or Buckinghamshire, how do they get in touch with Engage or find out more about the Rural Fund or apply? Where do they go if they're local?
So they can look at the Bucks Business First website, and there's also Rural Engage, which has got information about the fund, or simply Googling the Bucks Rural Business Grant.
Amazing. And for anybody further afield, you mentioned earlier, go to your local growth hub. What were the other signposts that you mentioned?
So it would be trying to sort of looking at your local authority, and sort of Googling things like the Rural England Prosperity Funds. That's what it's known as nationally. You'll get probably the .gov.uk website providing your allocations and to what local authority has got, and as I say, a lot of the time it's picking up the phone to the local authority switchboard and finding out who's dealing with it within the council to find out what's going on. As I mentioned, there are some authorities that opened up sort of within a month or two of the announcement, and others are sort of looking at launching this program in sort of the autumn or into the new year. So it's quite different across the country, but you can only find out by picking the phone up and asking questions.
Absolutely. And also, please do stay in touch with Will and all of the other guests that we have on the podcast, because often as one fund closes, another one opens, or they're aware of other opportunities that are popping up. They are your local funding expert in the grant space. Will, thank you so much for your time today. Hurrah that there is some money out there for our small businesses to tap into. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
No, pleasure. Thank you for having me on.